It's showtime.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
You know, the right to bear arms is because that's the last form of defense against tyranny.
Washington is fundamentally corrupt. There are more words in the IRS code than there are in the Bible.
Made in America, heard round the world. You're listening to Blunt Force Truth. I'm Chuck Woolery, along with my co-host, Mark Young, who's chomping at the bit this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whenever you're listening to us.
Whatever time it is. It just doesn't matter. Well, this is like show day for me. This is my third podcast so far.
I know. You've been working hard today.
I still have one more to go after this.
Oh, dear. Well,
yes. That's a lot of podcasting.
That is a lot.
It is. But you know what? It's fun stuff, you know, because we like what we're doing and we're passionate about what we're doing.
I was trying to figure out how long Rush Limbaugh was on the air in an hour. And I figured it was about 25 minutes airtime. The rest is all commercials.
Well, no, I can actually answer that clock for you. He would be on the air between 37 and 41 minutes an hour.
Oh, really? That much? I didn't think it was that much. Okay, maybe it's just because it goes by so quick.
Yeah, that's about right. Well, Chuck, we have a guest on today's show, and this is going to be a little different because people often talk about sometimes people accuse us of having an echo chamber.
Right, which is the easiest thing to do, obviously.
Right, so they'll accuse us of having an echo chamber, and people say, well, you never bring anybody in that has a different point of view than you do, so of course everything sounds like you're right. Mm-hmm. So today we have, well, we are right, I know that, but so and modest. So today we have a different kind of guest. So our guest today is Gerald Palmer. Gerald is a minister. I'm going to read this a little bit. He's a dedicated husband, father, licensed ordained minister, and a social worker, educator, life coach, mentor, socialist, social activist, and hold on to your seat here, Chuck, a proud progressive.
Well, if he's a socialist, he's a progressive, so I get that.
Well, I say social worker, not a socialist.
Oh, I thought you said
it was a socialist.
Well, okay.
Don't jump to conclusions.
Well, no, there's no conclusion. It's what it is. I mean, most people don't even have a clue what progressivism is or where it came from, so I'm, you know.
And Gerald deals with a lot of areas of spirituality. He deals with LGBT issues, racism, and a lot of different topics. So we're just going to have some fun. We're going to talk to him today, and we're going to get some different points of view. So, Gerald, welcome to Blunt Force Truth.
Welcome, Gerald.
Well, thank you so much, Chuck and Mark. I really appreciate it, and thank you for proving that you don't have an echo chamber. That is awesome.
Well, it's easy to live in an echo chamber, as you well know, but, you know, you got to break out every now and then. Get another point of view.
So, Gerald, let's start off with one of the topics. One of your concerns that you and I have shared some little Twitter battles with.
Before you do this, hang on, before you guys get into your Twitter battles, because I didn't know that, I'd like for Gerald to clarify what I said when I said, well, you're a socialist because you're a progressive. Now, do you believe that or not?
Being a socialist?
Would you accept that? Would you accept that designation, or do you not, or you reject it?
You know, I'm really undecided on that point. I mean, because I believe that when it comes to social issues.
No, that's not the same. Social issues are not the same as being a socialist.
Yeah, I wasn't finished. But
sorry.
when it comes to economics, I would be sort of like where Dr. King called himself. He was an economic socialist. So I would probably be at that point.
So you'd be,
especially being a social worker as well. So
you'd be a Keynesian guy.
I'll be a what? I'm sorry.
Keynesian, John Keynes, who was a socialist in Britain, who started Britain down the aisle of socialism and pretty much all of Europe after the Second World War. Oh, it's okay. You know, never mind, Gerald. I'm getting into things that, you know, most people don't really know because I study them, and I find that most people don't study them. So it's like, you know, okay. So anyway, I'll put you in that category because that's where you put yourself, in a Keynesian, John Keynes category of socialism when it comes to economics. So go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh,
Well, I was going to start off asking Gerald a question. So, Gerald, we see a lot of strife come up from people who get angry because people are wearing red hats. Now, I've got to tell you, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I think I'm speaking for Chuck. We don't see red hats or Make America Great hats as being racial. We don't see them as being divisive. We see them as being a political slogan to a president that we like. And we see the concept of making America great as a good thing.
Right. Yeah, I do understand that. But speaking from a person of color, the question that I always ask when I see that slogan, "Make America Great Again," I guess the question I like to ask is, in your mind, when was America great? When did it stop being great? And how can it be great again? And for people who are on the fringes of society, and when I say fringes, I mean folks of color, Native Americans, Black folks, even LGBT folks and women. There were times in our country when it wasn't great to be a person that was not in the majority. So sometimes when we say "Make America Great Again," it could make some people who have experienced oppression, or they're people that look like them or have a sexual orientation like them, experience oppression just for being them. There was a time when America wasn't great, and so sometimes that could make people step back a little bit. And then especially when groups like the KKK and other white nationalist groups have embraced that message, that can make a person like myself, who is Black, take a step back and look like, okay, what's the real underlying message here? So it's not just because the hat is red, because I like red hats too. It's the message, and words are powerful.
Well, I can see where you can interpret things to mean kind of what you want them to mean sometimes, or what you think they may mean, when in fact they may not mean that at all. But, taking from a bias or a historical bias, a political bias, ideology, whatever that is. But Make America Great to me is America has always had the potential of being great. Now, there are a lot of people on your side of the aisle who really don't believe America was ever great because of its founding and the people who founded it and the principles they founded it under. And they felt like, Blacks were left out, Indians were left out, fringe groups, as you put them, were left out. But over 200 years, with the exception of the Native Americans, the Indians, which have their own, continual problems, and then some of them don't, depends on who's in charge.
Well, it depends if it's Elizabeth Warren.
Well, no. But I mean, in all honesty, there are some parts of the Indian tribes and things that own casinos and things like that, and they make a lot of money. I mean, they do very, very well, and they're able to do things on reservations that we can't do. So they have privileges that go beyond that. But my point is this. Every country, I guess, we don't know the origin of Britain. You have to go back so far and pull it together, and Germany and Africa and all these, how they've come together and formed. Everything has its growing pains and problems, and it will always have those. They'll always be there no matter what they are. Some are personal, some are ideological, some are political. But this country has solved so many problems of race. I don't think we have near the race problems that we're led to believe that we have today. I just don't think Americans are like that. The average American, I don't think it's like that. Now, there are people who will always be racist in one way or another, Black and white, red and yellow. They just always will be. It's just who they are, what they've grown up with, what they've learned. But I'm speaking overall. I do not believe that we are in the racist country that the left has projected us to be in. I just don't think it's there. I don't think it applies anymore. I think we've solved lots and lots of those problems, and we're in a continual flux of solving those problems. Like, for instance, Trump has done something that no other president has done up to this point. Black people, oddly enough, at this point under Trump, they have more jobs than they've ever had. They have more opportunity. But wait a minute, they have more opportunity than they've ever had. Everybody, and by the way, so does everybody else. So I guess
a rising tide lifted all the boats.
A rising tide does lift all ships, but he never gets credit for stuff like that. And more women are employed today. We have more jobs and we know what to do with, and he doesn't get credit for that. And I'm not touting Trump. What I'm touting is the idea that we are progressing. We're getting better, not as a progressive nation, but just in progress itself. And a lot of times, because of personality or style or whatever, no one gets credit for that kind of stuff, or whether they're on the right side of the aisle or the left. I mean, it just kind of goes on and on.
Chuck, let me make a comment about Gerald with something Gerald said.
Yeah.
He made a comment that rang with me that I hadn't thought of.
What's that?
And his comment was that when people are thinking of Make America Great Again, some people may think that Make America Great Again means let's make America like it used
to be. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that with some people that may be true, but I don't.
And I could see that would be really disturbing to someone who's thinking, geez, I don't want to go back
there. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not what's in the hearts and minds of people. I mean, I can't speak for the KKK, and there's not that many of them, and I don't speak for them, but that's not what's in the heart and mind of the average person that's wearing a MAGA hat.
Oh, I don't think so either.
Yeah, but now something that Chuck said that I wanted to get on, if I can, is when he spoke about too, like America's not as racist as it once been in 200 years. Well, I'm 46 years old, and I am one generation removed from segregation. My mother grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, where I'm from, and she grew up in a time when schools were segregated. If you were black, you can only live in one certain area.
I grew up in segregation too in Kentucky.
Yeah, but
we're actually the first state. Happy Chandler was our governor, and he segregated all the schools. He was the first one in the country to do it. Is that weird? Okay. But it's true.
Okay,
so not segregated.
To desegregate it.
He desegregated. Yeah. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So what I'm saying is that message of Make America Great Again may make her, her step back a little bit. But as far as, and I just lost my train of thought, but what I was saying is that, so we're not as far removed from the racial angst and tension that we've had. I mean, things have gotten better. And as I look at my children and some of the experiences they have, and I could take them to the Kansas City Zoo on any day that I would like. But when my mom grew up, she could only go to the zoo on Sundays because that was Black Day, But there are still things and paths and roads that we have to go through. But I think the biggest issue is that we have to listen. I think on the right and the left. On the left, we have to listen. That's why I'm on this show, and I want to listen to different points of view. But I think on the right also that there has to be listening as well. Now, the problem I see with Trump is that he has, in my opinion, he has emboldened what is wrong with America. The so-called alt-right, white nationalist groups have been drawn to his message, and even the official KKK, and they might be small in numbers, but even they endorsed him, said we love his message.
Oh my God! That guy, who's that white guy that everybody's always after because he's so anti-black? And it was, I don't know, he wasn't with the KKK. I don't think he may have been. What was his name? That he endorsed Trump and everybody jumped all over it. It's like
you're not thinking David Duke.
David Duke,
right? That idiot.
Well, that wasn't, and I'm not just talking about David Duke, and that also opens folks' eyes too because he's agreeing with Trump's message. So that is, and so when you add that hat, that Make America Great Again hat, and then you also add in that hate groups have increased in America, and white nationalism has become very, according to the FBI, more hate crimes have been committed here in America, we have a huge racial tension problem in America.
Gerald, let me correct something right here, though. Let me correct something. Here's the problem with statistics, and it is the old joke about, figures don't lie, but liars figure. When these people are reporting an increase in hate crimes, let me tell you what's happening. They're reporting that hate crimes have increased by 1,000 incidents, okay? Now, the thing to keep in mind is that most law enforcement agencies were not reporting hate crimes to the FBI uniform statistics.
Right.
So in the past year, 1,000 more police departments have now joined the uniform statistics to input their data. So it's not that hate crimes increased, it's that the reporting of hate crimes increased. We didn't actually have an increase in hate crimes. We're just recording more of it.
So how do we know that we haven't had an increase if we've never recorded them? So that goes both ways, right?
Well, you could make the argument either way. So you could make the argument of, you can look at what's called a statistical baseline, or what would be called reduced to the mean. If we look at all of the agencies that did report, so the agencies that have been reporting, those agencies aren't showing an increase in hate crimes. So those are a baseline, and that baseline is staying flat. The increase in hate crimes is coming from the increase in reporting agencies.
Other agencies that have not reported in the past.
And just so you know, Gerald, this whole type of demographic and stat thing is a big part of what I do. This is an area that Chuck will tell you I know what I'm talking about.
There's a lot of stuff, right, which I can't get my head around, but I'm just a simple man.
Very, very simple, stable genius. Well, Chuck, not only do we have the best economy and the most robust country in the world, we also now have the best coffee. Covfefe. Covfefe coffee. This is coffee made by deplorables for other deplorables.
Awesome.
Now, here's something. Awesome. I got to tell you something I did not know. This is true. This actually is a commercial, but I'm still going to say something I didn't know. That some of the companies that are big companies selling coffee are sending their money to liberal causes like Planned Parenthood.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
You were aware of that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It was in the dark, Chuck. Like a dark roasted coffee. I was in the dark.
Well, that's a MAGA blend dark roast. That's almost a French roast. So
yes, it is. It is bold, strong, and great.
And that's how coffee should be, I think. Bold, strong, and great.
Well, when you buy Covfefe coffee, your money is what's that? Idea. You love that.
It's such a great idea.
You see the emblem on top here too?
Yes. And by the way, This is not a joke. This is real coffee. I mean, some people are out there saying, "Oh, they must have this as a prop." No, it's not a prop.
This is real stuff.
Real, and it's good.
And when you buy Covfefe coffee, your money is not going to Planned Parenthood or any other liberal whack job.
Where's it going?
It is going to support. All their money goes to support conservative broadcasts like this show.
Awesome.
So their money is out to support podcasts and shows that are telling the truth. Oh, so we have a special deal on Covfefe coffee, Chuck.
Yeah, where do you get it?
You get it by going to makingcoffeegreat.com.
Making Coffee Great.
Makingcoffeegreat.com. When you buy 2 bags of coffee, you get a $5 savings if you use the discount code BFT, as in Blunt Force Truth.
Blunt Force Truth. So we even have our own discount. I'm feeling like I've graduated. It's like I'm like a little Rush Limbaugh. Well, I would be a big one, but my own code BFT, you get a discount.
You have your own, so use the BFT discount, get $5 off 2 bags of Covfefe coffee. Making Coffee Great, and this actually really is good stuff.
It is good, yeah. It's very good. It really is.
This is good stuff. So you got to go try this out.
So let me ask you something, Gerald, because you said what do you, in all honesty, please don't hold back. What do you as a person, not by what you're told by everybody, but what you think personally, what do you think Trump's agenda is? And again, I'm not touting Trump or just doing a whole Trump thing. I'm just curious what you mean when you say Trump's agenda. What do you think his agenda is when it comes to society, when it comes to blacks and other fringe groups and things like that?
Yeah, I don't know if I said his agenda. I know his message. What do
you think his message is?
I don't. Now, I do want to clarify something. It's not about what I'm told. I mean, as a social worker, as a adjunct instructor, I teach my students to look at both sides of the issue, look at all the information, and my motto that I live by is information without context is propaganda. So I don't really know what his agenda is. In my opinion, I think Trump does things to help Trump, just based on his history and business history and all of that. So I think I'm not. So
let me interrupt you just a minute. So I just want to clarify that I'm understanding you. So everything that Trump is doing in the name of making America great again is really not. That's not really his agenda. His agenda is to make Trump great again.
Yeah.
So you think it's a very narcissistic approach?
Oh, I almost said it that word. Yes, 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 it is. I don't think. In my opinion, he hasn't shown that he really has the sincerity and care for anyone but Trump.
And how does he demonstrate that to you?
How does he demonstrate it?
Well, you said that's what he's doing, so it must be doing that somehow. So what is he doing day to day that demonstrates that?
Well, for one, if you look at how many of those who were once in his camp are no longer in his camp, and how he quickly turns on them, or if you look at
what's that got to do with you or me, though? I mean, that has nothing to do with you and me. Integrity is huge for me, especially as a leader. That is huge. And one of the things that turned me off was when he had and again, I'm a social worker, so when he had the Trump University, that whole thing really turned me off because people were hurt. And people were used, and some people put in all their life savings because they had a dream of maybe being like Trump and making money. And so I felt like if a person could do something like that, that person lacks integrity. That person lacks care for another human being. And so it's not what anybody told me. It was based on my own research, and yeah.
Now, let me ask you a question. President Trump has successfully operated a little more than 600 companies, and 6 of them have filed bankruptcy. Okay, one of them being Trump University, a couple of them being the what was it? The Taj Mahal, the casino.
Mm-hmm.
As an entrepreneur myself. First off, the majority of successful entrepreneurs, if you look at the Inc. 1000 of the fastest growing, entrepreneurs, on average, they've had 3 failures or bankruptcies each. When you look at President Trump's track record of 6 bankruptcies and 600 successful companies, that actually makes his track record as an entrepreneur phenomenal. Now, it doesn't take into effect that when there's a bankruptcy, people get hurt.
Right.
Because that does happen. But that's also part of the real world, that companies do go out of business.
So, Gerald, it's kind of interesting. Trump is, I find Trump fascinating. I did not vote for him. I did vote for him for president, but he wasn't my guy.
Right.
Because I, quite frankly, thought he was a New York liberal. I really did. I also find it interesting that people like Spike Lee loved him until he became president. And all of a sudden now they hate him. But he is the only businessman. Now, they say that Herbert Hoover was a businessman that became president. And Herbert Hoover was a businessman, but he'd also been in politics a lot. Trump had never been in politics. So he never had this shiny coat of armor that every politician who's going, or every person who's groomed for politics goes through. They don't have anything in their past. They make sure everything they say is, lily white clean, and they're all ready to go into politics and advance. And so by the time they get there, there's just nothing in their background. Well, Trump isn't one of those guys. He came out of a rough and tumble world of real estate in New York City, which I can't even appreciate what it takes to put up a building in the middle of Manhattan. I mean, I can't even get my head around that. But he's just a different cat. He's just not like anybody else, and we've seen it. And I can see where you can take away a lot of problems, but they really kind of come from politics or personality or things like that. And I can see where you can get that impression. But I also, the thing I was trying to get at is what demonstrates that to you in his actions as president. Has he done anything as president that makes you think that his agenda is just way off course and he doesn't take into consideration minorities and people like that?
Yes. His Twitter account is problematic. The way that he addresses other people. Well, for instance, it might be, conspiracy theorists or whatnot, but I notice when he is angry at people of color, he always attacks their education, their reading level, and things of that nature. To me, I go back to the whole idea of leadership, and I go back to the idea of as the leader of this country, we should expect more, and we should see more. And I just me personally, I can't get over that.
Let me ask you this, and I'll go both ways. Who in the Democrat Party do you think was the best leader that you can point to and say, this was my kind of guy, and this is how I want a president to act? Who in the past of the country? Yeah,
and I just want to clarify something. Either I'm a progressive, but I will vote for anyone who I think And
Hillary Clinton's a progressive, so you're in her company.
Well, you know what? I mean,
well, she said
she wasn't really my choice,
But she really said she was a progressive back in 2012. That's when she first kind of recoined the phrase, "I'm a progressive."
Yeah, I'm very progressive socially and politically, but I will also choose, a candidate that meets my, my.
Well, who do you like right now? Who do you like right now that's on the stage?
Oh my God! You know what? I don't really have I have not been really impressed with anyone, and I'm looking at both. Well, there's hardly anybody on the other side that has come out, but I'm really.
Does it matter to you? Does it matter to you? And really be honest with me about this. Does race matter to you or gender matter to you when it comes to running for president? Does it have to be a black woman or a black man in order to? So it does matter to you what race they are and what gender they are.
No, it doesn't. It does not matter. Race or gender does not matter to me.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
And that's a misconception that people have when Obama ran for president.
I had no conception. I just wondered.
Oh, okay.
If it mattered
I don't.
to you.
You know what? I don't really. I mean, you know what? Race does not matter to me. Race or color.
But race did
gender.
play into Obama, though. You have to admit, Obama had 97% of all African American votes.
Yeah, but he had a lot of white people voting for him too.
Yes, he did.
He sure did. He had a lot of white people.
No candidate has ever had that high a percentage of African American votes. So you can't say that. Well, African Americans all vote Democrat, because you can look at every other Democrat before that, and they never had that percentage of vote.
Well, he was well.
Yeah.
Come on, he was well liked by the
Well, you have to understand too. If you look at the history of America and there was never. The history of America, the race component, the not being allowed to vote. I mean, of course, people are going to respond that way. I mean, it was just a time in America where we felt that we were, we were stepping out of the race issue and racism. But
My biggest concern with Obama, when Obama got elected, part of me said, this is great. I'm happy to see that an African American has won the presidency. We can put that behind us. And then the other part of my concern was, and I think he's going to be a disaster as a president, and that's going to push African Americans backward.
But it wasn't because he was black. It was because of the ideology. This is the thing that really drives me nuts, is that they mix race, people mix race into this, and they get so confused that it's really ideology, not what color their skin is. It has nothing to do with that. I mean, I can think of lots of black people that I know of. I don't know them personally, but I know of that I would have great respect for being president. I mean, I really can.
Well, one of the issues about Obama was, some people it was ideology, but then on another hand, there were so many characters of him as a monkey and his wife as a monkey and as an ape.
Look, I mean,
let me finish.
Trump too. I mean, they do it to Republicans and Democrats alike. That kind of doesn't wash with me because that's done by everybody to everybody.
But there's a group of
people who will pull that kind of stuff.
But there's a history. Listen, Chuck, there's a history of character of black folk as apes, as monkeys, as raccoons, and all of that.
Well, that's ignorant, isn't it?
It's very ignorant, but we have to realize that it was an issue when Obama was president.
Yeah.
So,
you never answered my question, though, Gerald.
What was your question?
Who did you admire as a Democrat in the history of this nation as president? Who did you look up to as that was my guy? That's who I think did the greatest job, and that's what gave me the greatest hope. Even I don't care how far back you go. Just who did you admire?
Yeah, well, I'm laughing because the person that I admire now is very problematic, and I know that as being able to look this person up. But when it comes to,
you didn't admire anybody, that you couldn't figure out there was anybody who was running. So
I'm saying now. In the past, it was Lyndon Johnson.
Okay,
for me,
that was the guy.
Basically, that was the guy in the past.
Why was that? Because of the Civil Rights Bill?
Not just the Civil Rights Bill, but also, again, you have to take into consideration that I'm a social worker. So a lot of programs that he brought into America
how did his war on poverty work out?
Well, see, that's another issue because war on poverty, a lot of his programs and his vision was not seen because of the Vietnam War, and also a lot of the money for the war on poverty was cut by a Republican House and Senate.
How much money was spent on the war on poverty? Do you know how many trillions of dollars?
I can answer that one.
Go ahead, answer that.
$7 trillion.
$7 trillion was built, and the needle never moved.
Actually, the needle went backward.
And here's the problem, Gerald, that I find with Republicans and Democrats alike, presidents, senators, congressmen, no matter what. They promise things that can never be achieved, but the promises sound so encouraging and so great and so hopeful, but they never happen. And they all do it, and it drives me nuts.
Well, let me ask Gerald a question.
Okay.
Lyndon Johnson was a very well documented
racist,
screaming racist.
Oh, by the way, Gerald, just for understanding, I live within 15 minutes of his ranch in Texas, and I live on Lake LBJ,
and know his people.
Right.
He was a devout racist.
He absolutely was. Yes. There's no question about it.
So how do you square that?
Yeah, that's why I said it's very problematic. But when I look at, again, there's a few of his programs that are still here and still helping folks. One is Head Start. Head Start has its issues and concerns, but Head Start is still helping. There is also I can't even think about the word. Can't think of it right now. But yeah, but there are multiple programs. Even financial aid still helps a lot of us. But
let me ask you this: are you aware of the fact that the Democrats in Congress wouldn't approve Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, that it's the Republicans that
very
put it
aware. I'm very aware of that. But then later it was Republicans who continue to cut funding for a lot of those programs and his vision. But again, yeah, very problematic. And really, no matter who the politician is there's a lot of problematic issues and concerns they have. But you asked me to be truthful, and I told you who my guy was.
I believe you.
And
now I'm going to ask you another question. What Republican president do you think was the best Republican president and represented things that you liked and achieved?
Or maybe the one you think was the least worse?
Well, no. I mean, who do you think was the best? Or if you even have an opinion on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, very, very problematic again. I mean, I think the second Bush, I'm
you can go back as far in history as you like. You don't have to go, that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, yeah, I mean, you say Lincoln.
I don't mean to be putting you on a chopping block here.
No, I'm saying, I'm laughing because in my great-grandmother's house, there were four pictures on her wall. One was Lincoln. One was Jesus first. Jesus,
right.
White Jesus, Lincoln, Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. So, yeah.
Okay, so we had two representatives. Did that have any effect on you? I mean, did you like Lincoln? He was Republican, first one.
Yeah, I did like
John
Lincoln.
Kennedy, Democrat, first one, or not first one, but
He was a Democrat. Yeah, I did like Lincoln. Yeah, I did like Lincoln, and I still love his story of coming up, hard times, and
let me ask you how you deal with something.
Illness.
I'd like to introduce you to a new type of podcast. And by new, I mean there's never been anything like this before, not in terms of scope or ambition. The show's called Living Beyond 120. Science proved that lifespan could exceed 120 years back in the 1960s. And the Bible first mentioned living to 120 years 6,000 years ago in the book of Genesis. But the question is, how do we get there? Living Beyond 120 tries to answer this question. The show is an exploration into human longevity and what it will take for us to live longer, healthier lives, featuring interviews with some of the most respected minds in longevity science and tackling big subjects like how the medical system, big pharma, and maybe even our own government don't want you to live longer. Living Beyond 120. It's hosted by me and my co-host, medical expert, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden. You'll find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast directory, and you can also listen to it at the website livingbeyond120.com.
Let me ask you how you deal with something historically true that a lot of people don't know. I think you'll know this, and that is how the Civil Rights Bill got passed through Congress. And are you aware of how it got passed through Congress?
You know what? I'm made aware every time I log onto Twitter. A lot of people on the right remind me about how racist the Democratic Party was and the Republican Party.
Well, the Democratic Party really, in all honesty, and you certainly have to face up to this historically, they have been horribly racist. I mean, they really have. There's no question about that. And the Republicans have really been the leaders in so many instances of supporting the black people, which is one of the reasons Martin Luther King was a Republican to a certain extent, I think, because of that. Because he knew that.
Well, a lot of black folks were. Yeah, a lot of black folks were Republican, but then after the Civil Rights Act, then there was a switch.
What's it a switch? This is the thing that drives me nuts. You know how many senators in the South switched? Can you tell me?
No, I wasn't speaking of the. See, that's another too. Another concern is I'm not speaking of the senators who switched. I'm talking about the general public who switched. And you can't tell me that there was not.
How did the public switch without the politicians switching? So you're saying everybody switched voting for the other team all of a sudden?
What I'm saying, well, I mean, you had the Southern Democrats who left the Democratic Party because they were upset with the Civil Rights Bill, and they went to the Republican Party. And you had a lot of blacks who left the Republican Party and went to the Democratic Party. I know that I have them in my family.
Because of Nixon and Martin Luther King, that had a lot to do with it. Nixon,
yeah. And so there was a switch. And so, there was definitely a switch. And we see it still now today. So
but interestingly enough, the Civil Rights Bill would have never passed had it not been for the Republican Senate. They're the ones that put it on Johnson's desk.
And part of what we're talking about,
and that's history.
McGovern. Part of what we're talking about is the McGovern. What was that called? The McGovern, not consensus. It was the McGovern rule.
Mm-hmm.
And what the McGovern rule was when the Democratic Party at the DNC convention with McGovern came up with the platform of, we're going to convince America that the Democrats are now Republicans and the Republicans are now Democrats. And the whole purpose behind the McGovern doctrine was to try to get, the Democrats were trying to separate themselves from 100 years of racism. Because, I mean, the Democrats are the people who wanted slavery. They were the people who started the black laws. They're the people that were behind, Dred Scott. They were the people who started the KKK. And they were trying to get away from that history. So that's when the McGovern doctrine came up of, let's tell everybody we switched parties. But to Chuck's point, there was only one person in Congress that switched.
The only one. And that's absolutely true. It just was
right. And I know that to be a fact. But here's the thing, though. One of the issues I have is that, we hear how racist the Democrats were and the South was. But there was still, segregation and racism in the North. I mean, there was still support for racism and in the Midwest and the North. So it wasn't like the Republican Party was just these saviors of integration. That was not the case. It was still hard.
I don't disagree with you, by the way. I don't disagree with that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're absolutely right. You see, I'm 78 years old. So I grew up in the 40s. So I was little, but I mean, after the war, I was 5 or 6. And then I went through the 50s and did that. And then I sang on the corner in Ashland, Kentucky with 3 black guys who we all harmonized together and everything else. But they didn't go to my school then. And then eventually the next couple of years they went to my school and they became, instead of the black school that was in Ashland, Kentucky, they became part of the school because of our governor. And that was like a new experiment for Kentucky. So everything kind of, I feel for you, man. I really do. Everything has been slow and has taken time. But I mean, I tell you something, Gerald. If you look at society today, and I'm going to give you 2 examples out of my world. If you look at television, if you look at who's hosting game shows, if you look at who's hosting talk shows, if you look at who's doing commercials, in the majority, not the minority, in the majority, if you look at who's doing movies, who's starring in almost all the movies, you go to Netflix, and man, every second or third, it is a majority at this point, or at least certainly equal, but I would think more of a not a major majority, but a majority of black people who are starring in movies, television, series, everything. So, and a comedy, forget it. Sports, I can remember when Bob Cousy played for the Boston Celtics, there wasn't a black guy on the team. I can remember when Jim Brown came to the Cleveland Browns, because I lived in Kentucky and that was my team. And all of these guys, they were looking like, who are you and what do you do? Oh my God, he's awesome. And now I defy you to hardly find a white guy on a basketball team, on a pro basketball team, on a pro football team. So what I'm saying is, and that is done, by the way, because black athletes are better than white athletes, so they wouldn't be there. But the point is, things have changed, and it seems like no one even recognizes it. Why do I see it and no one does? Just in my arena.
Right. I mean, I acknowledge. By
the way, do you agree with what I just said?
I agree that things have changed.
No. Do you agree with what I said about percentages and advertising and a time when no blacks were in advertising at all?
Yeah, I mean, I I definitely agree with that. But you know what? I think what helped that was when Obama became president. We saw,
Maybe.
saw a lot of.
You might be right.
I saw that in especially advertisement. And I will tell a quick story real fast. My son is 17, a middle son. When he was like 4 years old, he came into our room and he was crying. And we asked him, why are you crying? And he said, I don't have a superhero that looks like me. And so we looked at all his toys that he had. He had Spider-Man, and he had Superman. Yeah, and none of them looked like him. And so we went out and tried to win Toys R Us when it was around. Toys R Us.
They weren't there. But now he's got Black Panther.
So with the Toys R Us, we couldn't find anyone, and so we found a black Green Lantern, and so he played with that for a couple of minutes. But now there's more representation.
Right. But it's interesting when you talk about Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, all the superheroes, Wonder Woman, and all that. They came out of the 30s, 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Right.
I mean, that's where the legacy of all of those heroes are. Some of them even Second World War. So it's like it goes back to the time of segregation and all the problems we were having that you just acknowledged and I acknowledged. So, yeah, I can see that. I can see where that would be, I'd like to have my own superhero. Somebody who looks like me. I get it.
Now, my daughter never had that experience.
I think it's funny that we talk about white Jesus and everything. Well, Jesus wasn't white. He was Semitic. I mean, give me a break.
Well, I mean, but if you look at,
he's got to be white. On top of that, who cares? Does it really matter what color Jesus is? I don't care. He can be black for all I care. I'd still love him just as much.
Well, that's a whole nother show, though. If you guys we talk about white Jesus.
Yeah.
So Gerald, let me ask you a question. Do you think
white Jesus? He was Jewish. Okay, so whatever Jews in the Middle East look like, that's what his skin color was.
So we're now seeing a lot of backlash or racism against white males today.
Oh no! Okay, you say so.
How many places do we see attacks on white male privilege? And we see, I mean, do you see what I'm saying, Chuck? I mean, you see this stuff. How many times, Chuck, does somebody send you a tweet saying that you're just a victim of your white male privilege?
Well, I'll tell you what we get, Gerald, just in case, and by the way, it doesn't affect me one way or the other because I don't care.
But we do see it every day.
Yeah, but I don't care about it. Yeah, I get that. But the point is, there's a whole movement today by the left of diminishing men, masculinity, putting women in the place of men. I mean, it's just really weird what's going on and how they're trying to reestablish all the lines or break them down to where we're all the same. Of course, we aren't. Everybody's different because they're individuals. And they kind of want us to march in lockstep. And that just drives me nuts. I like the individuality of the person, as somebody that's different that I can talk to. I mean, when I was in Los Angeles for myself, I can say this. I mean, I'm not going to fall back on the old thing. Well, I had black friends, so I'm not a racist. I mean, I did have black friends. I had really close black friends.
You and Rosie Greer were good friends.
Yeah, Rosie and I go back to
Sugar Ray. You and Sugar Ray were good friends.
Sugar Ray Leonard he and Bernadette are just, family friends. But it didn't. I never looked at Sugar Ray as a black guy or as Rosie as a black. I knew they were black. I knew that. I just liked them for who they were and what they'd accomplished in life, and they were great guys. So it's like I just hate this hyperbolic situation where everybody's got to be a certain color and you got to do this and it's not because it bothers my life. It just kind of doesn't seem right. I just don't get it.
Well, I think the thing and where I'm going with the white privilege thing, Chuck, just to add to that, is simply this. It is wrong for anyone to judge someone by the color of their skin or by their gender.
But we do it every day.
And it is wrong when
white people do it too.
That's my point. It is wrong when white people basically say that blacks have something wrong, or whatever the case is.
I really don't know whether Asians do it or not.
And the reason I'm saying that it's a mistake is because you didn't have a choice in being born black, and Chuck didn't have a choice in being born white.
Well, no.
So why should anyone attack anyone for something they have no hand in? They have no choice in.
Right. So the way I look at that, and that is a brilliant question, is I look at myself personally as what type of privilege do I have? And so I look at being male. I realize that I do have male privilege. You know, for instance, when I go to a restaurant with my wife, as soon as the check comes out, the check goes first to me. But I give it back to my wife because she has the money. So that's what I do. And then my
wife jumps in and takes the check. She won't even let it get to me.
Yeah. So, you know, and so then another privilege I have is as a Christian, I know that any of the holidays that we celebrate are going to be around Christian holidays a lot of times. And but I do believe that some of us are born with advantages that others are not born with.
Well, of course we are. And by the way, when has that not been the truth?
Right. If I wanted to play in the NBA, I need to be 7 feet tall. I wasn't born 7 feet tall.
Right. But then there are some other privileges, such as based on a person's race, and so we have to acknowledge that. For instance, if I go into a store, and then if a white friend of mine is going to a store, a male, same age and whatnot, a lot of times I'm going to be followed. I'm going to be looked at, basically because of the color of my skin. If I go into an elevator with other people, women, they're gonna view me as I'm gonna be viewed differently. I mean, research states that young black boys are viewed as older and more of a threat than their white counterparts.
Jesse Jackson said that.
Well, I don't know about. I mean, I've seen that. I haven't.
I mean, please, he absolutely said that. So there's got to be some reason he said that, and that was because he said it.
But my point with this, Chuck, is we can spend our entire lives fighting about, you know, the cards we've been dealt. Mm-hmm. I could sit there and have a fit saying I'm underprivileged because I wasn't 7 feet tall and I wanted to be in the NBA. Therefore, somebody owes me something. The reality is America was built not on equality. America was built on individual freedoms. It's the country where we all have an equal opportunity to become as unequal as we want to. And I think as long as we keep fighting to try to level the playing field, we're preventing people from actually getting on the field and playing the game. We all have our handicap.
Gerald, I got to tell you, I am so glad you did our show today because, you know, Mark and I both like to hear other points of view, other opinions.
Right.
And we really do appreciate it. We appreciate having you on the show today and your opinions. And, you know, there's still work to do. There's no question. I think that there's always work to do. Whether it's as Mark has a saying that I think is absolutely true, and I'm going to now quote my buddy. Things are never quite as good as they should be, or as you think they are, and they're not as bad as you think they are either. So somewhere in the middle, we have, and by the way, I think we will always progress. I don't think we'll ever go backwards. I think there's an element today who would like to drag us backwards and make us, you know, either pay for it again or feel like we need to pay for it.
And I think that element's on both sides.
Yes. I mean, it's kind of like the wall.
A good point.
It's kind of like the wall. The Republicans don't want it either. By the way, I'm not a big fan of the Republican Party, so just as we part company here, I want you to know that. Okay. I'm a conservative. They hate me more than they hate, you know, most anybody. And I'll tell you what my favorite president is. There were two of them that I had. One was Calvin Coolidge, and the other was Reagan, which you probably knew. But and by the way, I like John Kennedy. I served in the Navy under John Kennedy.
John Kennedy was amazing, and John Kennedy would have a hard time qualifying as a Republican today.
Probably, yeah. But anyway, Gerald, is there anything you would like to ask us or anything you'd like to add or where we can get in touch with you or what we need to do to stay in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean,
audience might want to do if they want to follow up with you.
Yeah, if anybody wants to follow me, I'm definitely on Twitter under Reverend Gerald Palmer. You can also do a Google search and find me the different social media. I definitely want to say that I feel very encouraged that after coming on your show, I feel encouraged that we may not always agree, but we will agree to disagree and be able to leave with an understanding, a mutual understanding, and not leaving as enemies. So I definitely.
Oh no. Well, you know what happened here, Gerald? What happened here was there's a difference between two groups of people who talk at each other.
Yes.
And in today's environment, in this show today, we didn't talk at each other. We talked to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned things from you that I hadn't thought of. Hopefully you might have learned some stuff from us.
Oh,
but yeah. The big thing is we're not as far apart as you may think. We share a lot more values than people think we do.
I definitely agree with that. And I hope everyone listens to this. I mean, it's not exciting as Fox News because there's no yelling and screaming. And,
oh my God, I don't find that exciting at all. It's depressing. I mean, all the networks, I don't care, right?
Yeah.
And I just find it depressing if you want to know the truth. But I listen to them because I have to. But I'll part with this. Gerald, when I was doing Love Connection, we did it 12 years. And my favorite, I was always happy when I had black people on the show because they were the best. I just had so much fun. And I always told my producer, I said, can we get more black people on the show? Because they're so much fun to deal with. I just love that. And he said, well, we can't turn it into a black show. I said, I know that, but, can we just have more? And so he did. And anyway, I've always had a great relationship with everybody I've known in my life. I don't hate anybody. I may dislike what they think or whatever, but Gerald, I think you're awesome. I really thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And we'd love to have you back sometime if you want to come back and talk to us about anything else. Maybe, what was that thing that I mentioned? You said that's a whole other show.
Black Jesus.
Oh, Black Jesus, right.
Yeah, Black Jesus, White Jesus. Yeah. Okay. Whole show on White Jesus. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Jesus with his blonde hair and blue eyes.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks, buddy. We appreciate it. We'll have all your information up on our board for everybody to see, okay?
Well, thank you. God bless both of you.
Thank you. God bless you, Gerald.
All right.
Well, Chuck, there we go. That was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, sure. He's a nice guy.
Well, if you like the show, make sure you go to iTunes, iHeart, Stitcher, leave us a 5-star review. I think the interview with Gerald does show what we said, Chuck, and that is
it depends on the individual.
Right. We don't have to yell at each other. We can talk to each other.
Gerald's not a yeller. I mean, and we're not yellers either. We just kind of find places where we can kind of understand each other, teach each other something, share information. I'm not going to change Gerald.
Now, I want to point something out real quick.
Yeah.
On Twitter, Gerald's a different person.
Well, that often happens when you come face to face with your enemy.
On Twitter, he was very aggressive and very attacked me on Twitter. In person, this is a good demonstration. People will say things when they're hiding behind that keyboard that they won't say when they're even voice to voice, let alone face to face.
Yeah. And
that's what we need to do. We need to stop screaming at each other over social media and have real conversation.
That's what I don't engage with people on Twitter that way. I just don't do it. I may respond with something like a one-word response or something like that, and then block them. But I don't see any reason to start blasting people, whether they blast me or not. They can have any opinion they want. It's free. It's free country.
We think you. We've come to the conclusion that you are the world record holder on the most number of people blocked on Twitter.
Maybe.
You currently have blocked 2,300 people.
Oh, I thought I blocked more than that. I thought I maybe.
You've blocked more people than most people have as Twitter followers. Well, that's it for today, buddy.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening to us. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next time on Blunt Force Truth.